Red Dragon Eclipse. My name is Daniel Vallis, and welcome to our channel. We're just a few hours away from a total solar eclipse occurring in Regulus the Lion, which reminds us of the Lion of the tribe of Judah. But a total solar eclipse is unique in that the sun is completely blotted out by the moon for a few moments. And many of you have probably heard about different myths that go with eclipses of how a dragon or monster eats up the sun or the moon depending on the circumstances. And sometimes there's a variation of it's a demon or a wolf. But there's so many cultural ties and stories about dragons eating the sun or the moon, particularly at a total solar eclipse. Now, of course, those are myths, but does it have some basis that led all these cultures to have a very similar mythology? There is a connection between astronomical dragons that eventually led to the mythologies that developed in the different cultures. And this is what we're going to study today, and we need to keep it in mind when we consider the celestial event that's on the horizon. Also in context of everything else we have seen, and what we know is in the future horizon just beyond the eclipse as well. The importance of it and knowing that there is an astronomical connection between the dragon and eclipses tells us that this celestial sign and this celestial event is very important. And we need to consider that connection in light of this context that we have seen, the past, the present, and the future. But before we go further, I want to remind you that astronomy and astrology are not the same thing. What we are always examining is astronomy, the science of studying the heavens, studying God's creation. Astrology is a counterfeit, it's a distortion of astronomy. Astronomy was around for over 1,000 years before astrology came around. Astronomy is science. Astrology, though, is false. But one thing we have to keep in mind, and particularly as we study astronomy, we have to always keep in mind that astrology, because it's a counterfeit, it will use many of the same terms from astronomy. And this is what gets so many people confused. Astrology will use some of the exact same words and terminology from astronomy, but they will use it for different means and different purposes. And we always have to keep this in mind when we are studying astronomy. Just because we are using certain terms that astrology also uses, it doesn't mean we're using astrology. It means astrology ripped off that word from astronomy. And I'm mentioning this because we're going to be covering some technical aspects of astronomy today that astrology copies a lot of those same words, a lot of these terms, but we're not using astrology, we're using the original, we're using astronomy. As Christians, we know the stars do not determine the future. They were created to tell signs, and the seasons, and the days and years, to tell time and how it's also linked to signs. But the stars themselves do not determine anything, let alone the future. Also, coupled with that, man does not determine the meaning of the signs. When there are signs in the stars, it is not for man to determine what those mean. And that is one of the key dangers of astrology is mankind makes up stuff that goes with what they see. They become the authors of what they call truth. You can run into that same danger even when looking at biblical signs, though. There's a lot of false teachers out there who tell you the signs have changed, and so they want to tell you what they think it should be. Man does not determine the meaning of the signs. God determines the future. And he determines the time. It is not up to us. He's also the one who determines what prescribed signs mean. When he tells you a sign is going to happen, he also tells you what it's going to mean. And we also see in Scripture that he tells us key past and future events on his clock. He told the world prophetically when the Messiah would be coming to Jerusalem and that there would be a scepter star that would be seen at that time. That's what the wise men were looking for because they were foretold it. And when they saw it, they knew that that was it, because they were foretold it would be happening, and they saw it on his clock, and they were able to go forward in faith. Likewise, we also see the future event he has described in the book of Revelation, chapter 12, about the sign of the Son of Man that he told his disciples about. And he also gave a celestial date for it on his clock. So he does all of the determinations. He determines when it's going to happen and what it means. God uses celestial star dates for certain prophetic events, such as the Revelation 12 signs, so we can see them and so we can know them. He uses celestial star dates so we can know exactly when those specific events will happen, because mankind changes their calendars, whether it's rabbinical calendars or Gregorian calendars or Julian calendars. those calendars change. But when God points out a specific star date, that will never change. We just have to do some homework to figure out when that is. And so we learn and we use astronomy, the science of astronomy, to find out his prophesied dates and his prophesied events on his celestial clock. There are very few events in Scripture that he gives a celestial time frame for, or even a specific celestial star date, but when he does, we can use astronomy to find out when that is. And this is important when we consider the upcoming event with the total solar eclipse, and then also the events just beyond that with the culmination of the sign of the Son of Man in a few weeks. The sun, moon, and stars were created for signs, for seasons, and for days and years, time. There is a methodology to them. There is importance in how the stars move. And this is part of the learning journey. We're having to catch up with a lot of knowledge that has been lost over the centuries. But the Lord is giving incredible wisdom and understanding and showing us more in Scripture how important his celestial clock is, particularly events that happen right on the ecliptic. And that should ring some bells. Do you know why it's called the ecliptic? Because that line is where eclipses take place. So when we see a total solar eclipse in a few hours, that automatically brings our attention to the line, the ecliptic, where those take place. Which reminds us of what Scripture says about that very important place. Psalm 19, the heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night showeth knowledge. There is no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. Psalm 19 is a psalm of David, who wrote about the heavens and how they do declare the glory of God. They were created to be signs that tell his story. And in verse 4, David himself talks about the ecliptic. This line which goes out through all the earth, this is where the messages, this is where the signs are seen and observed. This is where the messages go out, along the ecliptic. And it was created to be a tabernacle for the sun, a place of dwelling for the sun. And David uses the beautiful picture of a bridegroom coming out of his chamber and rejoicing as a strong man to run a race, in connection with the sun along that line. The sun does declare messages, day unto day. And take note that this was David's observation. He knew important messages, important signs took place along the ecliptic, in the heavens, and that they declare the glory of God. David knew it, Abraham knew it, Job knew it. We find this theme throughout the Scriptures, that they knew signs were seen, messages were given out along the ecliptic in the heavens, connected with the sun even. And that reminds us of what we've been studying with the disciples. Most of them were fishermen, they were sailors, they knew about the heavens, they knew about navigating. They knew Eritis phenomena, which was very popular at that time and in their part of the world. The Apostle Paul knew it, he even talked about it. They had a deeper familiarity with the heavens and how they worked. They were familiar with a lot of the terminology used in the book of Revelation, because they used it as part of their regular life. They did not have mechanical clocks like we do. They relied and they lived by the celestial clock that they saw. They knew that they lived within a clock. It determined the different times of activity, the different times of sailing, the different times of walking and traveling which they did. There were so many aspects of their life that were tied to a natural understanding of the celestial clock. They observed it a lot more. They did not have the city lights like we do today. They were much more familiar with the terminology and the natural motions of the heavens, just like David, than we are today. And so we have a rougher learning curve, and we're having to learn a lot that civilization and culture has lost over the centuries since that time, but it is learnable. We always got to keep this in mind when we look at Revelation 12, where the Apostle John, who was a fisherman, he's describing a celestial event in different constellations, and he plainly tells us these are two wonders, which is another word for sign or token or signal. He does see two celestial events going on in the heavens, and both of these take place over a period of time. They culminate on September 23rd, and this is what a lot of people overlook. Most of the sign takes place before that date. September 23rd is when it's done, but there's going to be significant events happening before that end date. The first part is talking about the celestial sign and the woman, but then The middle part, as we've been studying, talks about the dragon sign, what's taking place in that before the woman gives birth. And so just pause for a minute here and think. We're already observing the woman's sign in progress, pregnancy. We know it's getting closer to the delivery date. It's still a number of weeks off, but we're at a time where we know the dragon sign should be starting or has just started. We have already been studying the tail portion of it. We know the dragon sign is about to be engaged, and we've been learning more about it, knowing that it will finish in the events that it signals before the woman gives birth. And we've already done a lot of studying how it was common knowledge to people at that time, and the Apostle John and the 7 churches, that Draco, the dragon, was the fiery dragon described in Revelation chapter 12. So we know which constellation he's talking about, which constellation and sign he's observing. And so we've been studying the next steps and the different phases, how it breaks down a sequence that's going to happen after that. But it should catch your attention in verse 3, he mentions that there appeared another wonder in heaven. He's intimating that there is a time when the dragon sign officially starts, when the dragon does come onto the scene more prominently in a recognized fashion, when it catches your attention, just like the woman. That sign started when she became pregnant, and you could observe the pregnancy in progress. Likewise, there should be a time for the great red dragon to also come onto the scene in a prominent, noticeable fashion. And from our study about the tail time, and we know it's around here somewhere, we are at a time when the great red dragon should be expected even to come onto the scene, right in this time right now, when we study the timing of the concurrent birth that's going on in the woman, and the celestial events that are going on in the heavens with that. So we see in just a few hours a total solar eclipse happening on the line, on the ecliptic. And already in so many cultures and mythologies, there's already a connection to dragons with total solar eclipses. Right here at this time, where prophetically we've been warned that a great red dragon sign is about to appear, is about to come onto the scene. We need to do some digging. Is there an astronomical reason why dragons are associated with total solar eclipses? If so, then we see fulfillment of the Revelation 12 passage right here. There are so many myths and stories about dragons connected to swallowing the sun or the moon, primarily the moon, but there is an astronomical reason. When you look into astronomy, there is something called a draconic month. Now, I'll explain this in a second, but let's read so far. The orbit of the moon lies in a plane that is tilted with respect to the plane of the ecliptic. It has an inclination of about 5 degrees. The line of intersection of these two planes defines 2 points on the celestial sphere, the ascending and the descending nodes. Jumping down, it is important for predicting eclipses. These take place when the sun, earth, and moon are on a line. The 3 bodies are only on a line when the moon is at one of the nodes. At this time, a solar or lunar eclipse is possible. The draconic or draconic month refers to the mythological dragon that lives in the nodes and regularly eats the sun or moon during an eclipse. Okay, we'll explain this here in a second, but take note that eclipses only take place when the sun, earth, and moon are on a line, which is the ecliptic line. And they only take place at one of the nodes, the intersection node. At that point, a solar or lunar eclipse is possible. And the myth about the dragon comes from the nodes where the eclipses take place that are connected and named after dragons. That's where the myth comes from. It comes from the nodes, the places where the eclipses take place. Let's take a look at the heavens around 3000 BC. And this is when a lot of astronomical learning and science got started, and so a lot of terms go back to this time. But you'll notice that all the constellations are all still in the same place. And you'll notice the ecliptic, which is the line that goes throughout all the earth, and it goes through 12 key constellations, which are part of the astronomical zodiac, are also known as the Mazzaroth. And then offset from that is also the equator, which goes very similar to that. But in the heaven, you have the equator and you have the ecliptic. There's also there's really 4 major dragons that are in the heavens. And the ancients knew that these dragons, these constellations, were at key places along the heavens, along the line even. And so major things that happen in the heavens will take place related to these dragons. And there's also another dragon over there. But right on the equator is Hydra, which is the water snake, and it marks the equator. It lies right on the equator. Then you have serpents, which is right near the autumn equinox, right where the ecliptic crosses the equator. That's where the autumn equinox is, and the vernal equinox is over here at this other crossing place. And then in the North Pole you have Draco, which is known in the Bible as the crooked serpent. He's at the pole of the ecliptic and also the pole of the equator. And so you have these major dragons all at major places along where the celestial events take place. So signs that take place along the ecliptic or along the equator, they're going to be at major places in relation to dragons. And this was known for thousands of years, that the signs in some way are connected to dragons. That's how they are related and described. And throughout the Bible, you'll see different references to a Leviathan or the dragon or the serpent, particularly in the book of Revelation. The different locations in the heavens, whether that's along the equator or at the equinoxes or at the pole, it's all the same creature, so to speak. It's all the same dragon, but you just consider the different constellations as different chapters of the book or different aspects of the serpent. And you can tell by reading the context in the Bible, and even in astronomy, which particular constellation is being referred to. For instance, in the book of Revelation, it's talking about Draco, and we know this because it's talking about the great red dragon, which is the great dragon up in the north, and he's also red. Draco is the one that's been known as fiery, whereas serpents is known as a silvery color, and so that's one way we distinguish them. Historically, serpents is known as silvery, Draco is known as fiery, and Hydra is known as a water snake. So you'll see a lot of references in the book of Revelation that refer to Draco, the serpent dragon. And so because of where they are located, major celestial events are connected in some way, depending on where they take place, to one of these different aspects of the same dragon creature. The first instance that we're going to look at today is the vernal equinox, when the sun crosses the equator. And the sun is moving this way, so at the vernal equinox, the sun is rising above the equator, and it will then be traveling above the equator until it reaches the fall, when it will then go back down below the equator. But this important point, this intersection point here, is known as the ascending node. This node, this point, this place of intersection is called the ascending node, but it's also called the head of the dragon. Once the sun reaches this point and intersects, from that point on, it will be ascending above the equator. But since the equator is associated with Hydra, which marks the equator, it will now be ascending above the head, which is primarily in this section above the equator. So anytime the sun moves and starts ascending above the equator, it's at the head of the dragon, because it is now in a section that is associated with the head of the dragon. This point, which is even facing the head of the dragon, is known as the head of the dragon. This particular point where the ecliptic and the equator cross, that place right there for the sun. And there's a lot of carryover since there's multiple dragons that really represent the same dragon. And this was even understood in the ancient days, because Draco, the crooked serpent, is at the pole of the equator and at the pole of the ecliptic. What happens for the one also happens for the other. So anytime a celestial body goes above the ecliptic also, that is also called an ascending node or head of the dragon. And so other bodies, such as the moon or planets, they'll wave along the ecliptic as they move many times. And when they cross the ecliptic and start rising above it, that point is known as an ascending node, because overall they are ascending at the head of the dragon. They are now going above an equatorial line, whether that's the equator or the ecliptic, because the same dragon is at all of those points. So an ascending node is any time a celestial body goes above the equator or above the ecliptic, that point of intersection wherever that takes place, whether that's the sun, the moon, a comet, or even planets, is applicable to the ecliptic or the equator. That was the ascending node. But then, of course, there is the fall equinox, the autumnal equinox, And that relates to when the sun crosses the equator again, but now it's going below it. So now anything below the equator, which Hydra's right on the equator again, and its tail section is mostly under the equator. So anytime a celestial object goes below the equator, such as the sun, that point of intersection is known as the tail of the dragon, the descending node. And for the sun, that takes place at the fall equinox. That's the only time it crosses the equator, at the fall equinox and at the vernal equinox in the spring. The tail of the dragon, and it applies to the sun on the equator, but it also applies to other celestial objects such as comets as they move through the sky. That crossing place is considered the tail of the dragon, or the descending node, where it marks that they start going below the ecliptic. When the moon, as it waves along, when it crosses that, it's also known as the tail of the dragon at that point, at that descending node. And so that applies to anything below the ecliptic or the equator, that place of crossing where it starts going below those. And so looking at the moon again, here you can see the ecliptic, but the moon does not travel in a straight line along the ecliptic. It is offset, has a slightly different path than the ecliptic, so there's times when it goes below it, and there's also times when it rises above it. And so it will also have ascending nodes when it rises up above it, right at that point, and then it will also have descending nodes, the tail of the dragon, the descending node. And this is important to understand these nodes for the sun, or the general concepts of the nodes, the tail of the dragon or the head of the dragon, because eclipses only take place at one of these two nodes, primarily when the moon is at one of those nodes along the line. The sun and the moon have to be on that same line for a total solar eclipse to happen. And so this is a major event on the line that goes throughout all the earth, and astronomically it's connected to the dragons. That's how it's referenced of what that particular celestial object is doing wherever that takes place, wherever it crosses either of those two lines. Primarily the major line, the ecliptic, the line that goes throughout all the earth, the line where the messages are declared. And so when we look in Revelation 12, verse 3, and he mentions there appeared another wonder in heaven. He's mentioning there is a time when something happens when the dragon suddenly comes onto the scene. The symbolism of the great red dragon, the great fiery dragon, which is Draco. There's going to be an event on that line where the dragon comes onto the scene. The woman is already on the line, and that's where the pregnancy is taking place. But along that same line where the messages are declared, the voices are heard, along that line, the dragon is also going to appear and come onto the scene. And we're at a time when we see a major celestial event about to happen along the line, an event directly connected astronomically to the dragon. And so again, when we consider what John saw and how they saw it, and even how the seven churches would understand it in their day, when John says the red dragon is coming onto the scene and appearing, they knew that that would only happen at major celestial events when the dragon is known to come onto the scene and quote-unquote cause certain events to happen. Because all the major celestial events, primarily with the sun and moon, will directly relate and are connected to the great red dragon. And so we're at a time right now when we're already expecting these events to happen, and we see very prominently along the line an eclipse with an astronomical explanation that the great red dragon, Draco, which is at the poles and oversees the other aspects of the dragon is responsible and connected to this celestial event. This total solar eclipse, astronomically, is the red dragon eclipse, the dragon appearing and coming onto the scene. And then it should further catch our attention where this total solar eclipse is taking place. It's happening in Leo the lion, which represents Judah, the lion of the tribe of Judah, which is just above Hydra, the serpent, even above the head of the serpent. The lion has long been portrayed as treading on the serpent dragon there. And it's important what the moon is doing, because we've learned that total solar eclipses will only happen when the sun and moon are exactly on the same line when they're at one of the nodes. And because of where this total solar eclipse is happening, we know the moon has moved to the node to make that eclipse possible. which brings up the question, which node is the moon at? Is it at an ascending mode? Is it at the head of the dragon? Or is it at the tail of the dragon? Is it descending below the ecliptic? What is the moon doing? Well, when we pull up the moon's path, this red line here, we see that it's been waving along and it's about to rise above the ecliptic, which means this node where this total solar eclipse is taking place at is a head of the dragon, because it is an ascending node. It is rising above the ecliptic. So this total solar eclipse is not only connected with the lion of the tribe of Judah, it's also connected with the head of the dragon. The dragon's head is what causes this eclipse. The dragon is coming onto the scene. This symbolism is known just by how the celestial clock works, and this is how the ancient world well understood it. So it needs to catch our attention when we look at the progression of celestial events we have seen, leading us to here. There's been the 2 blood moons and then a total solar eclipse back in 2015, then 2 more blood moons with the Star of the Wise Men parallels and the Star of Bethlehem events, and then Jupiter opposition at the next, exactly at the next, total solar eclipse in 2016. And now we're at a place where we're just shortly away from another total solar eclipse. This one caused by the moon at an ascending node, which is known as the head of the dragon, just at a time when we are expecting a great red dragon to come onto the scene. And when we look on astronomical sites that talk about the alternating nodes of the moon's orbit, this is astronomy that we're studying here. The nodes are an astronomical subject of this science. The August 21st, 2017 total solar eclipse in a few days, the moon is in an ascending node. That's how it's rising at that point. And it should catch your attention, though, that the last total solar eclipse, the ones in 2016, that was a descending node, the tail of the dragon. That's what caused that one. And then even the one at the North Pole, back in 2015, right between the 4 blood moons, that was also in the descending node, the tail of the dragon. We've had 2 tail of the dragons, but now all of a sudden we're seeing the head of the dragon. The dragon is coming onto the scene finally, right at the time when he's expected to. That is the timing of this celestial sign, right within an expected prophesied time, right with the expected celestial events that go with it too. The fiery red dragon, the eclipse that marks the dragon coming onto the scene. The line does go throughout all the earth, and it's declaring the glory of God. And it's declaring how the Lion of the tribe of Judah is going to be coming onto the scene to tread down the serpent dragon, in all the dragon's different aspects too. There's a whole message going on here just with this eclipse, where it's taking place at, in the principal actors and the messaging of even how the clock is moving. It's telling us that the dragon is coming onto the scene, but it's also telling us that the Lion of the tribe of Judah is coming to tread out the serpent dragon. We are at an amazing time. We have been shown so much. For the past 3.5 years, we've been shown signs pushing the world and culminating, increasing in intensity, telling the world the Lion of the tribe of Judah is coming. There are about to be some very significant events. The prophesied events on God's calendar that He foretold us about are about to happen. And we saw months ago the Revelation 12 sign events starting, and now we're at an event where we see even just a few hours other major events in the Revelation 12 sign are about to happen. It's all collective. It's all cumulative. We have seen signs that build upon each other. It's all connected. It's all one massive sign. And this is why I keep telling people there is no plan B. It's all one sign. It's not piecemeal. It's not some signs here and then maybe take some and get rid of some others. No, it's one big message. It's all about the Lion of the tribe of Judah. It's all about the sign of the Son of Man. It's all building to one single message. And it needs to catch our attention that along the line, along the ecliptic line, this is where we've seen that message in a distinct portion of that line, repeatedly emphasizing the Lion of the tribe of Judah. That's the main message we've seen over the past few months and years. It's all about the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And what He said would happen, it's happening. And that's leading us to August 21st, which is a direct segue from what we have seen with the Star of Bethlehem, the Wise Men parallels, segueing directly to the Lion of the tribe of Judah when the red dragon comes on the scene, which is part of the sign of the Son of Man events described in Revelation 12. What we saw back in 2015. It's all been building up to what's about to happen. It's all connected. It's all one sign. It's all along the line in one particular place. This needs to catch our attention. We are running out of time. The heavens are declaring the glory of God. They are declaring what time it is and that we are running out of time. We have been told to look up. We've been told we will see and we will know that our redemption draweth nigh. Who's our Redeemer? Our Redeemer is the Lion of the tribe of Judah. We've had so many signs telling us he's coming. Is it affecting how we live? I've updated the timeline to better organize some of these events and the progression that Revelation 12 describes. Definitely print out this material. Print out the timeline. Go to the library if you have to print it out. Go to a UPS store and use their computers to print it out if you have to. This information, we've been foretold it so we can know it because it's supposed to affect how we live. The book of Revelation was written and told, send this to the churches. They are the ones who need to read this. Because when we know the time, we should be waking up and living as though our Redeemer is about to return. Our King, our Bridegroom, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, he's about to return, and he's been telling the world that he's coming. And he's also told us specifically that other major things, such as sun destruction, is about to happen as well. There are events on God's calendar that will happen exactly when he said it will happen. And we are not at all surprised that we see a total solar eclipse in a few days that's matching exactly the celestial events that are described in Revelation 12. Because it's happening exactly on time, right when it is expected to. Right in this time frame when we were expecting the dragon to show up, right in the time frame when we were expecting the tail time to start from our best understanding, and everything's happening right on time. Which means we're running out of time. We can't say the rapture is going to happen at the eclipse, but with everything else that he's described will be happening within that tail time. Once the dragon comes onto the scene and the tail time starts, there are specific events that are going to be happening in that window of time. He's described them and foretold it. That's most of the content of Revelation, is describing those events that happen in the time that he described they would happen. And when the stars would be falling, we know when that's going to happen within that time frame. And our bridegroom said he's coming before those start. So when we see the dragon come onto the scene, we know the next events are about to start. We are so out of time. Is this affecting how we live? When we look up, when we lift up our heads, when we see, and when we know what time it is. If you haven't yet, definitely download the Revelation chapter 12 sign. There is a lot of information in there. Print it out, study it, share the information with others. Isaiah 26:19. Thy dead men shall live, together with my dead body shall they arise. Awake and sing, ye that dwell in dust, for thy dew is as the dew of herbs, and the earth shall cast out the dead. Come, my people, enter thou into thy chambers, and shut thy doors about thee. Hide thyself as it were for a little moment, until the indignation be overpast. For behold, the Lord cometh out of his place to punish the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity. The earth also shall disclose her blood, and shall no more cover her slain. In that day the Lord with his sore and great and strong sword shall punish Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent. And he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. In that day sing ye unto her a vineyard of red wine. We are at a time when our bridegroom, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, is about to call his bride into the chamber, into the bridal chamber for 7 years of intimate fellowship. The door is going to be open for a brief moment. He's going to say, arise, my love, and come away. And then the door is going to be closed, and a time of indignation is about to start. And notice that back in Isaiah, he foretells exactly what's going to be happening during this time of indignation. The Lord is going to be punishing Leviathan, the piercing serpent, even Leviathan, that crooked serpent. And he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Notice how he's using the 3 different aspects of the dragon at the major points in the heavens. Because even in Isaiah's day, they understood how the celestial clock moves. They knew the significance of the major points in the heaven along the line. They knew the messages that were declared in the heavens. They knew that when total solar eclipses happened, they had a specific dragon inference with them. And during this time of indignation, when the Lord is punishing the inhabitants of the earth for their iniquity, he's also going to be casting down the major aspects of the dragon even in the heavens. And remember how even Jesus said, the powers of the heavens shall be shaken and the stars will fall. There are going to be way more bizarre and abnormal events happening during the tribulation than most people realize. all the high places, all the power places of the dragon, the serpent is going to be cast down, the dragon is going to be cast down, and when he finally is, at the culmination of the sign of the Son of Man, then the serpent, then the dragon will know his time is short. And that's what Revelation 12 tells us, because the Lord is coming to cast him down, symbolically and literally. We are at this prophesied time when we have been foretold this will happen. We are expecting our bridegroom any moment to call us into his chamber because we have heard those messages going out. The bridegroom cometh. Get yourself ready. Shine bright. The door is going to close. And then a time of indignation is going to start. And it's directly connected to the celestial events that Jesus Christ warned his disciples about in Matthew and in the book of Revelation. Because these events will happen. We're at that time. We see him unfolding even as we speak. The Lion of the tribe of Judah is coming to cast down the serpent dragon. He's coming to cast down Satan and all his powerful places in the earth and the world. This time is about to happen. We are in the days of Noah and Lot right now. Are we looking up? Are we lifting up our heads? Do we realize what time it is? Are we letting the signs that are going on right now affect how we live? We are told these two signs will appear. We've already seen the woman sign appear for months now. We've already been expecting the dragon sign to start. And we see in just a few hours a very distinct celestial sign along the line connected to the dragon, the great red dragon. We're running out of time, folks. We're running out of time. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. Day and the day uttereth speech, and night and the night showeth knowledge. There is no speech, nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line is gone out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them hath he set a tabernacle for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber, and rejoiceth as a strong man to run a race. Are we listening to what the heavens declare? What they are declaring about a bridegroom? What they are declaring about the time? What they are declaring about the events? What they are declaring about our Redeemer and about our redemption, about our bridegroom? What the heavens are declaring about our Redeemer? This impressed upon David when he looked up into the heavens. He knew the importance of what the heavens declare along the line. And he talked in multiple places about the heavens when he looked up into the heavens and considered how God considers us. All that he has done for us, our Redeemer, our Mediator. And in Psalm 19, David looks up into the heavens. He looks at how it works, how it shows knowledge, how there's an orderliness to it, how there's a reliability to it, how there is a design, how there are specific movements. Their line has gone throughout all the earth. He looked at what the heavens declare and God's handiwork, and it made him consider his Creator, and it made him consider himself. At the end of chapter 19 he says, Moreover by them is thy servant warned, talking about the commandments of God, and in keeping of them there is great reward. Who can understand his errors? Cleanse thou me from secret faults. Keep back thy servant also from presumptuous sins. Let them not have dominion over me. Then shall I be upright, and I shall be innocent from the great transgression. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. What is our reaction when we look up into the heavens? When we look at all the celestial signs that we have seen over the past few months and years? What is our reaction? When they remind us about our Redeemer, when they declare the glory of God, when they show knowledge, when they show his handiwork? Does that stir in our heart to want to serve him more? Does that remind us of our Redeemer? The heavens declare the glory of God. When we look up into the heavens, it should remind us of God. That is what we should be thinking on. That is what we should be dwelling on. And then our relation and fellowship with him. And in verse 11, what came to David's mind, the man after God's own heart, David the king, who had his own servants and who rewarded his own servants, he knew that God, our King, also delights in rewarding the servants that serve him, and the servants that diligently seek him and that desire to draw nigh to their Lord. There is great reward when we desire to be a peculiar people, those zealous of good works, for our Lord, for our Master. And David says, who can understand his errors? Lord, help me understand what I need to do. Cleanse thou me from secret faults. If there's something in my life I don't know about that offends you, Lord, tell me, show me. Because I want to cast it off. I want to remove that works of darkness. I want to shine bright for you. Cleanse thou me from secret faults. When David looked up into the heavens, he was reminded that we need to cleanse, we need to purify, we need to wash our hands and wash our feet, The same picture is used in the New Testament. And we should be zealously removing anything in our life that keeps us from drawing nigh to God. And asking God for wisdom. Lord, show me what you don't want to see in my life. Show me what's keeping me from shining bright. Show me what's keeping me from bringing forth fruits of the Spirit in my life. In verse 13, David says, keep back thy servant also from presumptuous sins. Lord, keep me from sinning. Presumptuous sins are sins that we know full well we are sinning and we are doing wrong. And David just finished saying, keep me back from secret faults, the things I don't know I'm doing wrong. But then he also said, Lord, keep back thy servant also from presumptuous sins when I know I'm doing wrong. Lord, keep me back, hold me back from doing what I know is wrong. Lord, I want to serve you, I want to draw nigh to you, I want to be close to you, I want to have a heart after you. Keep me back from presumptuous sins. David did not want to be a hypocrite. He did not want to sin willfully. A just man falls, but he gets back up again, and this is a principle that David knew. Yes, we will fall, but let's get back up again. Let's draw nigh to our Redeemer. David looked up into the heavens, and he used this to remind him of his Creator, the glory of God, what he was doing in our world, and then it caused him to reflect upon his own life and his own heart. And David's conclusion when he looked up, when he lifted up his head, was, let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. He looked up, and it affected how he lived on a daily basis. The same for us. Our Redeemer wants us to look up. He wants us to lift our heads. Why? So we will see the glory of God, so we will see his handiwork, so we will see the signs, so we will see the messages that are declared that our Redeemer, that our redemption draweth nigh. And it should affect how we live. We have seen so many signs, last generation signs, prophetic signs, agricultural signs, and celestial signs for months and years now, telling us the bridegroom cometh. And it's culminating together in prophetic times that we've been foretold about. The bridegroom cometh, the door's going to open briefly. Arise, my love, and come away, the door is about to be shut. The time of indignation is about to start. We've been foretold these so we will know when time is short. We will be able to see and know. We have heard the message. We can look up into the heavens even now and we can tell that time is very, very short. The events that we were told will happen are happening. How are we living? Are we rising up? Are we trimming our lamps? Are we going forward to meet our beloved, who is our Redeemer, the Lion of the tribe of Judah? I hope so. Now is the time when we need to cast off any weight. We need to cast off the works of darkness. We need to shine bright. We need to bring forth the fruits of the Spirit in our life now. We need to be examining our heart. We need to be examining our life. Lord, are there secret faults in my life I need to take care of? Show me. Give me wisdom. Give me understanding of what I need to do. Lord, keep me back from presumptuous sins, things I already know I shouldn't be doing. Give me strength. You are my strength. You are my Redeemer. Help me serve you. Help me shine bright for you. Help me draw nigh to you. This is a time when we need to look up into the heavens, and we need to look into our lives. For our redemption draweth nigh. And this we know, that time is short. Let's rise up, let's go forward to meet our bridegroom, let's go forward to meet our Redeemer. And let's love him and serve him first and highest above all else. Maranatha.